put my glasses there because I'm going to forget, and then I'm going to be running around looking for them. I also want you to know that I'm doing this under protest because I hate spiders. Anyway, the history was actually, this history was not written by me, it was written by Mike. I told you I hate spiders. I have to go now. Change my underwear. That's pretty good. The history itself was actually written by Mike Johnson, who couldn't be here this weekend, and so I'm going to use his history as a cheat sheet. So if you see Mike in the future, thank him for doing a cool history here. So Dead Man's Point, right here, this rock formation at the intersection of Bear Valley Road and the 18. Why do you call it Dead Man's Point? Well, I had often wondered about that when Dennis came up with the idea of doing this plaque, and fortunately Mike cleared that up. But it isn't because of any particular dead man, but for several dead men. But let's actually step back in time all the way back to 1772, when the Spanish soldier Pedro Fages, who, if you've ever been down to,
You're good. You're good.
if you've ever been down to Anza Borrego Desert and down to the state park there's a place called Fages Point. Fages was on the, we're trading out. Thanks. Oh, I like that one better. He was on the De Anza expedition, and at any rate, in 1772, a couple years after that expedition, a couple of soldiers deserted their posts from, I'm assuming, down around the San Gabriel Mission area or the Pueblo of Los Angeles area. Although in 1772 that wouldn't have been founded yet, but that locale, and came out here to the desert, and Fages found one of the soldiers dead in a cave in the rocks here. There's also the idea that in 1885 there was a man was found here wrapped in his blanket and had his personal effects surrounding him. My favorite, there's another one in 1887, unidentified man found dead, but my favorite one is this, 1896, a miner returning to Holcomb Valley after a spree in town, got drunk, missed his ride back to the mountains. He started walking towards the mountains, and instead of bringing a canteen with him, decided to bring a bottle of whiskey instead. So that was
Save the bread!
Exactly. I bet he was a clamper. And that bottle of whiskey was empty, was found next to his body sometime later. And that is the true one from Marcy. Yeah, I like that one. That's a good one. Now, the rock formation itself forms a geographical boundary between Lucerne Valley to our east, Apple Valley here to the west. And if you look through the history, you'll see a bit about Lucerne Valley, and it has to do with some of the trails that we have marked over the years. One of them is Van Dusen Road. So, as you know, in 1860, gold was founded by our namesake, Billy Holcomb, up in Holcomb Valley. And most people that came to Holcomb Valley to the mines came up the Santa Ana Canyon route. That was really only suitable for horses and pack animals or coming up on foot. If there was anything heavy that had to be brought up, boilers and other heavy equipment, you couldn't make it up that canyon. It was just way too steep. We did a Vituscan back on that route way back when Batwing Brian Nash was the head abbot, and that is just even with a little bit of development where you can get a Jeep up there, it was quite a hill to climb. So you couldn't bring heavy equipment up that way. So instead, heavy equipment was brought up through the Conewood Pass, John Brown's Toll Road, across the base of the mountains there, and then finally up into the Holcomb Valley from this northern side, from the Lucerne Valley side. After a little bit, those mines petered out, but there was a reawakening of activity in the 1880s, and some very heavy boilers and stamp mills and other equipment were brought up that way. But they didn't call Lucerne Valley that quite yet. Now, there were areas there like Rabbit Springs and Old Women Springs, which we marked when I think Mansell Hutzel was humbug way back in the early 2000s, that were very important in terms of the cattle industry. the cattle ranchers would summer their cattle up in the mountains in the Holcomb Valley, Big Bear, or back then Bear Valley area. And then when winter was approaching, they'd run them down through places like Rattlesnake Canyon and hit Old Woman Springs and bring them around the east side of the mountains and down towards Whitewater and for the wintertime for pasture down here. It wasn't until 1896 that a man named Goulding, James Dad Goulding, came into the area. He was came in on a covered wagon from Colorado and over by Rabbit Springs, which is maybe about 6-10 miles to the east of here, just this side of the town of Lucerne Valley. Built himself a log cabin, dug a well, and started a homestead there. It wasn't long before people realized that there's a fair amount of water under Lucerne Valley, and people started raising apricots and apples and other fruit. But what they really found was quite profitable was alfalfa. And the variety of alfalfa that they grew was Lucerne, hence the name Lucerne Valley. And today, although a lot of the alfalfa fields are gone, there are still quite a few of them left. So if you happen to be going back to your homes going on 18 and going east, you might look for that. And you can definitely see the areas where the alfalfa was grown in the past and the areas that were irrigated. We did a Vituscan out there, Cougar Buttes. I want to say it was around 2010, 2011, and we did a fairly good roundup of the history of Lucerne Valley then. So the name stuck for Lucerne Valley, and it's been that ever since, and it's got quite a going community there, including, and I'm not being paid for this, the Route 247 Cafe, where one can get the finest vanilla shakes anywhere. Later on, mining would add its imprint to the Lucerne Valley area. In 1957, Kaiser Cement Corporation opened up the mines that you can see on the north-facing side of the San Bernardino Mountains as you drive through Lucerne Valley. And then later in 1950, that's going up the Cushenberry grade, which is the grade that you take now when you go up to Big Bear, and you can see all those works there. Later, that would be sold in 1988 to Mitsubishi. And if you attended Billy Holcomb's 50th anniversary, the year before COVID, so 2019, you may remember that the monuments that John Ziagos, ex-Noble Grand Humbug, dedicated, one was to the cement plants. And as I recollect, the Joy Boys created the little telescope thingy that you can look through and see exactly where that stuff is. Although it really doesn't take a telescope to see them, because pretty much the entire north face of the San Bernardino Mountains is ripped up trying to get that limestone for cement, which is very important. Apple Valley here to the west, a little bit different. The area that would later become Victorville and Apple Valley was first traversed by a European in 1772. Francisco Garces came through here, and if you know much about the old Spanish Trail, you remember that Francisco Garces traveled through essentially the route of the Mojave Road all the way to San Gabriel Mission, and then took off going north, back up as far north at least to Bakersfield before he came back down, back through this area, back to the Colorado River, and then down to the Yuma villages. But he was through here, and then later on in 1885, we have the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad building through the area, and they established a stop called Victor, which of course later became Victorville. Apple Valley itself became known for its, guess?
Apples.
Apples in the early 20th century. Apples, pears, and all kinds of other fruit. I have a pretty cool book about the history of Apple Valley and Victor Valley, and it's got a ton of information and cool pictures. I like pictures. I'm not really into reading, just looking at the pictures of the area. But unfortunately, as you know, the desert can be pretty harsh weatherized. Heat, cold, hail, wind, and a combination that combined with some fungal outbreaks in the mid-1940s brought an end to the apple and fruit business here for the most part. And Marcy, I'm sure, will know more about that, right? Cool, a little bit more. And then, of course, we have Roy Rogers and Dale Evans, to whom we dedicated plaques. What was that? 18 months ago, right over there at the Horseman's Shed. There, look at that. There's the the history right there, and most of you were probably at that Doins. Roy Rogers and Dale Evans opened their museum first in Apple Valley in 1967. They moved it to Victorville in 1976, and then finally to Branson, Missouri in 2003. But unfortunately, in 2009, it was closed permanently. Now, the Western Village. I had no idea about this until I got hold of the history the other day from when I checked in, and that is that a fella by the name of Mike Dressler, a realtor in the area, set up a Western Village, kind of like I kind of pictured it as a mini Calico in 1959. If you look through your history, you'll see mention of that Western Village in the local papers as it was making progress, but by the time it was finished, there was an Indian fort run by a guy named Chief White Eagle, where a fella could get jewelry and beadwork and leather goods and costumes and Navajo rugs. You had a general store and a feed store, a land office, which Dressler assembled. I have a feeling that the entire thing was to push his land sales. Restaurant, blacksmith shop, Western apparel, all kinds of good stuff. What eventually happened to it, perhaps Marcy can fill us in on later, but one of the interesting points is that Dressler put out a challenge. He wanted something, some sort of an effect to draw people to his Western Village, which, by the way, officially opened on Memorial Day weekend of 1959. And so he put out an ad looking for a rock sitter. At that point in the late 1950s, flagpole sitting was kind of fun. I don't see how that could be fun. I think that would develop a great case of hemorrhoids, but that's just me. Rock sitting, I think, would be better because you have a flatter surface. Know what I mean? At any rate, he put an ad in the paper, and a fella by the name of Jim Coble answered the ad. Spent 90 days sitting on a rock. Every morning he'd get out, put up the flag, the American flag, and his only contact with the ground was a 150-foot cable that brought him food and water. He had a little shelter, a little windbreak. He was up there in rain, hail, sleet, snow, the whole deal. I don't know about the snow, but it was summertime, so probably not snow. But it sure gets windy and hot there in the summertime. How it was that he took care of his personal business is not indicated in any of the papers that we know of. Now, the most important thing, to me anyway, because it terrified the poop out of me when I was a little kid, and that was in 1955. I wasn't in 1955, but the movie that I'm referring to was filmed in 1955, and that, of course, is Tarantula. Right there. I'm going to keep an eye on you to make sure you're not backing me there. On this side. Tarantula starred actually a Western movie star, and that was John Agar. If you ever watched some of the John Wayne movies where he's playing a cavalryman, she wore a yellow ribbon, and Rio Bravo and a few others. John Agar's in that, but he was one of the stars of Tarantula, in which a gigantic, tarantula that was created by some scientists who had the idea that they were going to develop a nutrient that would solve the world's hunger problem. And they tested it on plants and animals, and it kind of got a little bit out of control as the giant tarantula escaped from the lab. I think it probably ate, I can't remember because I'm never going to see the movie again because I'll never sleep. It ate the professors there, injured them or scared the crap out of them too, maybe, I'm not sure which. And anyway, started advancing on the local desert town. So I was just disappointed, though. I'm crestfallen because I was talking to a gentleman, where did he go, from the Historical Society. Where did he go? Might have been. At any rate, and I said, yeah, this is where the giant, he said he was around when they filmed the movie. And I said, oh, you must have seen the giant tarantula then. And he said, no, they just took the pictures here and sent it to Hollywood, and they put in the tarantula. And I couldn't believe it. I was crestfallen. Anyway, in fact, when I came out here, I was expecting to see the remains. The way, of course, should I tell you? Here's a spoiler alert, so if you don't want to hear it, but it's got something to do with the history, and that is this. Who was it? This will be a question. This will be a question for the Vice Humbug. Who makes an uncredited appearance in Tarantula, who later became a very famous actor of the screen? Clint Eastwood is the guy who flies the fighter and drops the napalm on the spider at the end of the movie. And so thus ends the giant tarantula. Other movies included Fast and Furious, Green Lantern, Valkyrie, Mythbusters, and the same gentleman was telling me about a 1950 science fiction film that was filmed on one of the dry lakes over here. I believe he said it was called The Earth to the Moon, which Destination Moon. Thank you, Destination Moon, in which the rocket launches vertically. Of course, the guys climb a ladder to get into the rocket, go all the way to the moon, and they land vertically as well and crawl out, just like Elon Musk wants to do with his space vehicles as well. Well, I believe that's about all I have, so I'm going to turn it over to Marcy, and here you are.
Thank you. Well, I have just... All right, thank you. I've just been informed by, I believe, Troy, are you the one that told, that I probably made history by being the only girl that's gone to 2 gray beard dinners. So, yeah, I'm going to put that on my resume. All right, so I did attend, thanks to Dennis, 2 gray beard dinners. I loved having that dinner. It was Italian this year, right? Oh, yeah. And I was the only one there that couldn't grow a beard. I tried. It just wasn't happening. All right. So I am here representing the Apple Valley Legacy Museum, which is about, I don't know, a mile and a half down the road. Mojave Historical Society, could you raise your hand if you're a Historical Society member here? Some of them are over there, and some of them are over here. Okay, there we are. The town of Apple Valley. Councilman Bishop is not here. He had some excuse about going camping with his grandkids or something like that. And I'm also representing the Apple Valley Historic Advisory Committee. Just so you know, Friday, the day of the dinner, several of our members, I think it was 18 of us, went on a Lucerne Valley driving field trip, and we went to all 4 of your monuments, among other things. So we were out at Old Woman Springs Ranch, Chimney Rock, the Mitsubishi, and the 50th anniversary area. Yeah. And those sites were so high that the person leading the field trip, who you'll meet before long, had to bring 2 stools so people could get up there. So somebody might want to install some stools or lower the sites. We found that out on our field trip. In the Miners to Movies brochure, I saw some of those same sites mentioned. So that's a good job, Mr. Historian. I think it was Doc Johnson. And on behalf of the Mojave Historical Society, it's really important that I thank not only the grand humbug, Dennis Parker, but there's other clampers that have helped us refurbish our Mojave Historical Society monuments. Is Dave Dutcher in the house? Okay, that's right. He was there all day, and it was about 100 and I don't know how many degrees. He and Dennis worked on 2 of them down at the cemetery. Troy Bithell. Where's Troy?
Troy boy. He went home.
He went home. All right, well, he sealed, I don't know how many of our monuments in one day, probably about 8 of them. Then we have Michael Stafford, Eric Nielsen, and Wade Grand. Are any of them here?
Yes, they are.
Where are they? Stand up, take a bow.
Yeah.
All right, so
Thank you.
they did the first monument that we needed to have a plaque replaced on because somebody graffitied it and different things. That was out at Lanes Crossing. I would also like to thank the Pirate for placing the first Apple Valley monument, the Roy Rogers monument. Where is he? There he is. There he is. And we hope that this started a fad because we kind of felt neglected here in Apple Valley. Now we have 2 monuments, so maybe you guys can think up another one. So I'd like to present Dennis with some mementos. They're not exactly expensive mementos, but some more information on how Dead Man's Point got its name. And there are 2 postcards. These are replicas, of course, from the 50s era of Dead Man's Point, and one calls for a 2-cent stamp. So I know that they are legitimate, and here they are. And I would like to present Dennis with this important information.
Nice.
Look at our photographer. So if any of you can remember 2-cent stamps, that means you're kind of old. A little bit. I remember it myself, I think. Anyway, I loved watching the Tarantula movie Friday night. there were not only great shots of Dead Man's Point, and from this angle, you know, it's kind of hard to picture, but the tarantula came up over that way, and it was actually filmed on the other side of that outcropping, right? Yeah, no, it's over there. It's where the two roads came together. And the person that was alive and well and from Apple Valley, that is Bruce Hollenbeck. Where are you, Bruce? Oh, there, that's the one. He remembers this. He remembers mostly everything, to tell you the truth. Anyway, I really got a big kick out of watching that movie. I also have some notes here about how much the extras got paid per day, the cast, the hotels, the meals, the wardrobe, all the usual stuff, including the planes, the pilots. But I would like you to read, I would like to read to you June 9th, 1955, a sheriff's report. And this is in conflict of what we've already heard, but this is true. It is stamped right there, June the 9th, 1955, and it says, the Sheriff's Office at Victorville, California reported to Universal International Unit Manager, looks like Norman Demig, a total of 27 creature from outer space reports during the past 3 days. It says, this is official, I'm not kidding you, it says this coincided with a 3-day location just completed of the Tarantula Company with John Agar and Mara Corday. A gigantic electronically operated tarantula 60 feet high and 50 feet wide, the biggest monster ever put before a camera, was used for horror scenes on the Mojave Desert, the only area where a creature of such proportions could be maneuvered. Hysterical motorist observing this out-of-the-world phenomena coming over a distant hill, creating all sorts of mayhem, went dashing to the sheriff. Remember, they didn't have cell phones and probably not even many landlines back there when the sheriff was in Victorville. Dashing to the sheriff with tales of destructive creatures from Mars and a half a dozen assorted planets in interstellar space. The sheriff, who had been prepared for such an onslaught, said the folks were mightily disappointed to find out it was only a movie and not some legitimate catastrophe. So there you have it. You can believe what you want, but this is officially, and it's stamped by the sheriff's office. Okay, so you can see Tarantula is very important to us here in Apple Valley. He rode on our 2022 Happy Trails parade float, which was dedicated to movies made in Apple Valley, and there were a lot of them. He appeared at our Christmas party at the Lone Wolf Colony, which some of you know, you've camped over there, I think. It's a historic place. He chased away the super soaker wielding gunslingers at our museum's 8th anniversary hoedown on April Fool's Day. So he didn't really fool anybody. He got run out of town. And you know it was made by a mad scientist and all of that kind of stuff. And you just never know when that tarantula might happen to appear, because, you know, it injected a little spider and in 3 days it was this big. And then it got bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think some of his relatives might still be around here somewhere. So, try to shoot him. I think we can shoot him. No, it's not doing any good. It's not even phasing him. All right, scream at him. Tell him to leave. Tell him to... Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. You guys are in danger.